Guys, in this video I want to talk to you about waiting. Now this is a really key thing that you want to find in your process. If you think you're having issues and things are taking too long, you want to understand where things are waiting. So in this video I'm going to give you some examples in various industries, show you some tools that we use to diagnose where they actually are, and then give you some fixes that you can start using straight away. So this is part of the overall better flow method, where we're trying to find where the flow breaks down. We're trying to fix things by removing friction, understanding how to standardize various tasks and improving the throughput overall. And then we're trying to keep things flowing over the long term by measuring processes and then preventing things from going backwards. Now this is one of the 8 overall wastes that you'll see in any kind of process. So if you start looking in and diagnosing issues, you'll usually find it comes under one of these categories. I've already talked a lot in previous videos about defects and overproduction. In this particular video, let's concentrate on waiting, and let's jump straight into some real life examples so that we can see what this looks like. So here's the first one. Now this industry is all around logistics and warehousing, and we have some kind of issue around the overall time it gets from having received goods to dispatching those goods. So what first thing we do is we need to map out the process. Now I've done this very high level, so you can see that there's a bunch of packages that are being received. There's some form of pick list that has to be drafted. We have then a picker that's assigned to the particular part of the process. Then we have the items being picked. There's a QC process, and then they get dispatched. So you can see the bottleneck here is actually up front, where we start thinking about that pick list and the assignment of the picker, not so much where it's actually being picked. It's caused by hidden delays in that part of the process. Now in this one, it happened to be a 3-hour delay that we were seeing between when something turns up and when something's actually being scheduled to be picked. That's where we need to concentrate exactly what's going on. But the idea here is that we use the process map to start seeing that. Now the second example, we're using a slightly different tool called the SIPOC. Now the SIPOC is where you can break a process up into its various parts, and we can look at what supplies a particular process. So who are the suppliers? What do they actually give the process? So what is the input? What is the process itself? Usually you would break it into 5 or 6 steps so you understand the high level process. What is that process actually producing, and then who is it producing it to? So it's a really nice way to break up a process. This particular example, you've got a sales team. They're actually supplying some customer issue data, and then the process is all about customer support handling those tickets and that particular data. Now we saw in this particular process that some of the inputs being made into the ticketing process weren't very good. There was missing information. People were waiting on various bits of information before they could progress the actual ticket, and that was causing all of the issues. But again, the really good way of looking at this is using a SIPOC type diagram, where you can break it up to understand who's giving you information, what are they giving you, what's the process, what is the process output, and who's it going to. The third example is very engineering and manufacturing focused. Typically, when you're doing any kind of manufacturing, you're going to have different types of products that are produced on similar machines. Now, one of the methods we use to make sure that that's as quick as possible and the changeovers are as quick as possible is something called SMED, which is single minute exchange of dies. Now, this basically is a way that you can have a way of changing any kind of fixturing, for instance, very quickly on a machine, and it cuts out all of the wait time in between different setups of different components. So we've gone through a couple of examples and a couple of ways that you can diagnose the waiting time or the cause of waiting within a particular business. Here's the start of some of the ways that you can fix what is actually happening. One very typical thing to do is to implement visual management. Now this could be in the form of a board, it could be online, it could be actually out on a shop floor, and basically you're breaking your process into various steps and then tracking something through those steps. In my old days at General Electric, we called this the gate system, and basically it enabled us to measure every part of the process in a lot easier way, and having it visual on a board really draws your eyes to where things might be on stop or waiting in this case. So you can see the first process is broken into what's got to be done, what's queuing up, what's in progress, what's actually waiting, and what's being completed. And our eyes would all go to the waiting column to start with to understand why is that waiting, what's it waiting for, and you can help to diagnose exactly what's going on. The way that you can fix some of these things in an actual business is to look at various tools like standard operating procedures or 5S. Now, standard operating procedures are basically procedures that tell you line by line how to do a certain job or a certain task. If you can get that documented, whoever's doing that particular task, as long as they got the correct skills, can do it in a very similar way to the last person that did it. In certain industries, this is absolutely fundamental to making things as efficient and as safe and as high quality as possible, following manuals step by step. Other industries are slightly different I've worked in, but basically SOPs still work well because it allows you to onboard people very quickly, and it also allows you to train other people from other parts of the business in your particular process. So SOPs are very key. The second thing is having a overall strategy of 5S. Now 5S is basically cleaning up your area, making sure it gets a lot easier to find things in that area and understand what things are actually being flowed through a particular process. And what you do is you go in there and you set things in order, you make sure things look good, you standardize the way that things look, and then you sustain the overall process with audits. This can be done physically, works very well on things like shadow boards, laying areas out, but it also can be done virtually. And one example I like to give is if you look at your desktop right now and you got hundreds of files on there and you can never find anything because it's all saved in different locations. If you can do a element of 5S on your desktop, you're going to save yourself minutes, possibly hours every day trying to find things. So if I think about how we can diagnose this, there's a number of things that you might start hearing within a process. And when you start mapping things out, these are the things you can start having discussions about. So one of them could be everything feels slow and we don't know why. And of course, what we can do there is start mapping things out and then building in some time studies to figure out where things are actually slowing down or even on stop in some cases. Another thing is we keep fixing things, but it happens again. Now, what we can do here is bring in some concepts like 5 whys. 5 whys is a very easy way for you to start understanding what the root cause, the actual cause is of a particular issue. If you can keep asking yourself why a number of times, 5 is kind of the guide, but it doesn't have to be 5. You can start getting a little bit more detail about a process every time you ask why. This is a really key way that you can start understanding what the true root cause of some of your issues are to prevent them from happening again and again and again. Now the problems are we've got so many issues I don't know where to start. You can use tools like Pareto analysis. Pareto is a concept where 80% of your issues are usually caused by 20% of your factors. So it could be something like 1 or 2 parts of the process cause most of the delays and most of the weight within that process. If you can go ahead and tackle them, you'll see that time reduced by a significant amount. One thing very common is every employee does the job slightly differently. Talked about SOPs, talked about 5S. This is a way of standardizing the whole process. Ideally, everybody would follow that SOP and that 5S type strategy. So everybody would do things very, very similar. Again, if you're in safety type industries, this is fundamental to making sure things keep safe. In other industries, it's just more fundamental to make things more efficient, so you're not recreating the wheel every time you do something. And the last thing is work gets stuck halfway through. You need to understand where it's being stuck. How can I make that more visual? Whether it's some kind of planner on your desktop or whether it's visual on the shop floor, you can use things like Kanban boards. Break the process into various steps, understand what those steps are doing, and then understand very clearly when things are being waited for so that it directs your eyes in any kind of conversation and we can make sure we focus in on those issues. So if you think about all of those tools, the overall continuous improvement flywheel of find, fix, and flow, they all fit into certain parts of that process. Process mapping is key to start with anything. You've got to understand what the process looks like. SIPOC's a slightly different way of doing process mapping, very powerful if you want to understand the relationship between your suppliers and your customer and how things are working out there. Understanding how long things take, especially in waiting, is key. And then using those 5 ways to get everything down to that root cause level to prevent things from happening again. Then you have around the fixes, you can use single minute exchange dies. If you're in manufacturing, you can use Kanbans, SOPs, 5S. All of those tools can work independently or together to make things a really robust way to fix your issues. And then overall, if you want to track things going forward, you're going to have some kind of measures around KPIs, some form of accountability as far as audits and stuff are concerned, and then some form of way that you can have a continuous improvement mindset that you're always trying to fix things as you go through a process. So that's how everything fits together. If this video interests you, don't forget to hit the subscribe and notification bell, and I'll let you know whenever I produce new videos. And if you're interested in really understanding your waste in your process and how much you're actually having of that waste and measuring that waste, go ahead and hit the link in the description below. You're going to go over to my website. You're going to take the free waste calculator, and that's going to help you really understand the impact of various types of waste on your business. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Till next time, take care.